I remember my college strength coach for baseball and volleyball occasionally standing over us in the weight room. Maybe we're on the bench or whatever. Be like, all right, 10 reps. You bang out the 10 reps, and then he doesn't take the bar from you. He's like, nope, 4 more. What? Come on. Nope, 4 more. What the benefit you're going to get out of these 4, you could only get after you did 10. These next 4, this is the part where it really pays off. Now you can get everything out of it. Go. And then you battle and grunt and sweat and heave and spit and try to get out another rep or 2 and make him happy. But probably the guy had a point. The early reps, they don't really do a ton. They just set you up for the bigger payoff that comes later. Likewise, the way we're working through the book of Matthew together, we're 700 and some days into this. We've been doing this for a real long time. And you might notice that if we could chart this thing out on some kind of graph, that it's taken longer to get through each successive chapter. But think of it like the reps in the weight room, right? Like there was stuff early on that, it's just all fresh. We're just getting into the story. There's some payoffs from the Old Testament, but like Matthew chapter 2 is only paying off 1 chapter at that point, Matthew chapter 1. Now we're into 26, and it's paying off 25 chapters worth of other stuff, plus all of the stuff from the Old Testament. And Matthew is a book that stood the test of time, whether you think there's a God behind it or not, and I happen to think there is. We can all agree this thing is spectacular. It is immaculate. It is beautifully put together. This is not lazy writing. And so the payoffs are just coming every sentence now. And if we started in Matthew chapter 26, I don't think we get all of that benefit. I mean, you just can't start in Matthew chapter 26. You got to do the 10 reps before you can get into the really intense reps where you really see the growth happen. And so I'm excited about the pace, and I'm grateful. Every now and then I go over and I glance at the numbers, like just make sure that there's still anyone actually listening. And whoa, like there is. Dang, not only are you all still here, you invited your friends. And so that gives me the impression that you are down with the pace and that you enjoy the payoffs. And we got another payoff today as we inch through Matthew chapter 26. Let me pivot toward that a little bit right now. The point is, thank you for being awesome. Thank you for being willing to do the work with me to really spread this thing out in front of us. Thank you for not making me ever feel rushed. You're so nice. You're so patient. I love doing this. This is awesome. Okay. Double analogy day. Do you ever go on the Twitters or the Facebooks or whatever, and there's some viral video? It's usually from a closed circuit TV security kind of thing. And somebody does something real bad to somebody else. And there's not a lot of context to it, but immediately everybody is like, oh my goodness, this just proves that I was right about everything about what's wrong with the world. All of my opinions were correct. Just look at this video from this one time this thing happened. Everyone should do the things that I say. That proves it. That's how the things are. And then inevitably person number 2 comes along and they're like, whoa, now hold on a second. Yeah, that looks pretty bad from my perspective on the world, but we need some more context here. Like, what's actually going on for realsies? And then the next video comes out and it just flips. Like, oh, that totally affirms person number 2's narrative. This is outrageous and proves I was right about everything. And then person number 1 is in the position of, give me some context. But in fairness to context person, they have a point. Sometimes you see a little tiny nugget of a thing, and it is worth stopping to ask, like, well, okay, what happened before? What happened after? What's going on here? What's the actual situation? When did this happen? Where did this happen? A lot of times the information we encounter is divorced from all of those pertinent details that really do frame what you should take from the thing that you just observed. Likewise, it's the second one in one episode. I'm pretty proud of that. In the book of Matthew, and particularly in the book of Matthew, you've got all these payoffs from stuff in the Old Testament. And a lot of times, whether it is Jesus referencing that Old Testament passage or Matthew giving us some narrator commentary saying, oh, and so was fulfilled this thing that was written by the prophets. Either way, a lot of times those quotes they're pretty quick. They come and go. There's an assumption of previous knowledge on the part of the author, on the part of Jesus, that the audience will be like, oh, yeah, I remember that one. That's Isaiah. Oh, yeah. That's Zechariah. Who could forget that beloved half sentence from that passage? But we have those in our culture too. We the people, the force is strong with this one. Speak softly and carry a big stick. All of these things they're very limited in terms of the number of words that are there. And maybe some of us don't even know the context for all three of those statements. Maybe you know all of them. But there's some cultural assumption that, if you're an American, it's 2020 something, those remarks are going to evoke something for you, some kind of context. Well, Matthew and Jesus are behaving the same way with all of these prophetic references that they make. And there is a really, really fast one that Jesus makes over in the passage that we were looking at in Luke chapter 22, which is the parallel account from Luke of what we're looking at in Matthew 26. And I told you that we were going to check out that allusion, and indeed we are going to. Now, this isn't from Matthew. This is Luke quoting Jesus, but here's what he says in the midst of the whole sword controversy we were talking about yesterday. And then Jesus asked them, this is Luke 22:35, "When I sent you without purse, bag, or sandals, did you lack anything?" "Nothing," they answered. He said to them, "All right, but now you have a purse, take it. And also a bag, and if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. It's written," quote, "and he was numbered with the transgressors. And I tell you that this must be fulfilled in me, yet what is written about me is reaching its fulfillment." And the disciples said, "See, Lord, here are 2 swords. That's enough," he replied. Acknowledging that we broke down a bunch of the potential solutions to this confusing little passage yesterday, we got to come back to the fact that there's an Old Testament reference here, and anytime we've been looking at any passages that have an Old Testament reference, we go and try and figure out how exactly this applies. What do we do with it? And maybe yesterday you were like, man, on all this sword controversy stuff, I just don't know how important it is for Jesus to fulfill some teeny tiny little phrase that only has, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 words in it. I'd need to see the bigger context. Show me the whole video. What happened before that? What happened after? Seems like Jesus might be grasping at straws here. Is this actually some kind of prophetic reference that Luke is pointing us to and that the disciples would have heard in all this stuff we're looking at in Matthew chapter 26? Would they have been thinking, oh, wow, Jesus is the fulfillment of that brief reference to being numbered against the transgressors? Well, as I mentioned yesterday, that is an allusion to the very famous Isaiah chapter 53. This is a passage we have looked at before because it comes up a ton with Messiah stuff. And the Isaiah 53 material kind of bleeds back into Isaiah 52. So here's what I want to do for most of the rest of our conversation. I'm just going to read you the end part of Isaiah 52, and then the next part of Isaiah 53. And here's where we circle back all the way to that stuff I was saying at the beginning about the payoffs and doing all those reps, because then it's the ones at the end that really count, that you earn. You got to get there first to be able to appreciate it and get everything out of it. I just want you to note how much of this language pops for you now after having worked our way through so much of the book of Matthew together. I read it in preparation for our conversation, and more popped for me than did before we started into Matthew. So check this out. This is God speaking through the prophet. "See, my servant will act wisely," Isaiah 52:13, and moving forward. "He'll be raised up and lifted up and highly exalted. Just as there were many who were appalled at him, his appearance was so disfigured beyond that of any man, and his form marred beyond human likeness. So he'll sprinkle many nations, and kings will shut their mouths because of him." That's a reference to sprinkling blood, an Old Testament priestly rite that was to be carried out. "For what they were not told, they will see, and what they have not heard, they will understand." Now into 53. "Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and familiar with suffering. Like one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not." Did you catch some of the linguistic source material there for "O brother, where art thou"? It's hiding in there. I thought that was kind of fun. "Surely he took up our infirmities and carried our sorrows. Yet we considered him stricken by God, smitten by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we're healed. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he didn't open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. And who can speak of his descendants? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgressions of my people he was stricken. He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. Yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life a guilt offering, he will see his offspring and prolong his days, and the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. After the suffering of his soul, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. Therefore, I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death and was numbered with the transgressors. For he bore the sin of many, and he made intercession for the transgressions. And then chapter 54 goes on to talk more thoroughly about salvation coming through this suffering servant. 55 talks about more of the same stuff. Okay, so when we zoom out and we're like, all right, I need to see what happened before and after the video. I need to see what happened before and after the prophecy to figure out what the real narrative is here. How much does this actually matter? What we see, I think, are two things that are pertinent to our conversation. One, oh yeah, when Jesus says here at the Last Supper and on the way to Gethsemane, when he says, and he was numbered with the transgressors, as a reference to a prophecy about himself that had to be fulfilled as the Messiah. Oh, dang. Okay, well, when you read it in context in Isaiah 53, yeah, it's pretty important. Literally every other line is fulfilled there as well. Yeah, that's legit. It might seem like just a quick phrase, but when we really get into it, we see why it matters so much in the story that it tells. But further, think about that reference happening right there toward Isaiah 53. It's occurring in the moment in the narrative in Matthew 26 and in Luke 22 that Jesus is facing abandonment. How much have you and I seen that theme play out here in the whole Gethsemane Last Supper narrative? The theme of abandonment by his father, only being attended to by an angel, but not hearing from his father the way he has in other places, being abandoned by his friends, being abandoned by his government, being abandoned by his religious leaders and his own tradition that, remember, he is still a part of. Isaiah 53 pounds that theme of him being crushed, him being rejected, him suffering all of these things, him being disfigured beyond human recognition. But then also it pounds the theme of this has to happen because this is the culminating point in redemption, restoration, forgiveness of sins, making things right. This is being done for a reason. He is taking the punishment of many on himself. There's so much Matthew on this. There's so much Luke on this. There's so much life of Jesus that we are seeing being brought to the surface in Isaiah 53. And if we didn't do those 10 reps first, we couldn't get all of that additional value out of these last more heavy lifting reps as we go and look deeply into the context of Jesus' passing reference here about being numbered among the transgressors. It's a pointer, it's an arrow that directs us back to go and check out a passage like Isaiah 53 and to better register all the value that is there that we might have missed the first time it came up as we were journeying through Matthew. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.